couple of years ago, I did a video on 4 mysterious deaths and disappearances, which no list of mysterious deaths and disappearances would be complete without talking about the Dyatlov Pass incident, so yes, I have talked about this before. But of course, that was just a few minutes out of a much larger video, so I wasn't really able to get across all the details in just that small amount of time. Plus, there has actually been some research in the last year that may actually tie this mystery up with a bow. Most of it anyway. So I'm not going to waste any more time on an intro here. It's the Dyatlov Pass incident. It's one of the weirdest internet mysteries in the whole world, and it might actually be solved. Let's talk about it. On January 27, 1959, 7 men and women went on a hiking and skiing trip in the Ural Mountains of Russia. Their plan was to hike from the city of Vizhai to the top of a mountain called Otorten. It was going to cover 306 kilometers over 14 days. Let me stop for just a second and acknowledge something. Like, I always hear people talking about the Dyatlov Pass incident. I never hear people talk about how dangerous and ambitious this trip was. They were going to be hiking, camping, and skiing for 2 straight weeks over nearly 200 miles of mountains in Russia in January. I think it's safe to say there were plenty of opportunities for things to go wrong. The group consisted of graduates and students from Ural Polytechnical Institute, and all of them were experienced hikers and skiers, which, I mean, they would have to be to try to attempt a trip like that. In fact, that's kind of one of the things people point to, is the fact that they were such experienced hikers that kind of makes this whole thing a lot weirder. Now, to be fair, there were some really weird circumstances around this particular expedition. Okay, so they left on January 27th. There was a 10th member of the group. His name was Yuri Yudin. He actually was a little bit sick at the start, and he decided to drop out. Probably a smart move on his part. So Dyatlov told Rudin that he would send a telegram to their sports club when they returned to Vichy. So this was supposed to happen by February 12th, but he told Yudin that it could possibly take longer. So February 12th comes and goes. Nobody really thinks anything of it. But then more and more days pass. Relatives started to get concerned and started to demand for a rescue mission. The first volunteer rescue group set out on February 20th, and after that, the army and police got involved. And the hiking group was finally located on February 26th. This is where things start to get weird. Let's start with the abandoned tent. It was half torn, covered in snow, and all the hikers' belongings were still in it, including their shoes. Even stranger, it looked like it had been cut from the inside. Footprints were found, and they followed these footprints out to nearby woods where the bodies of Doroshenko and Krivonishenko were found, beside the remnants of a fire. Also, they were only wearing their underwear. A nearby tree had broken branches up to about 5 meters high that suggested maybe they climbed the tree to maybe look around for something. So they investigated the tree and actually found traces of human skin on the bark, so that kind of supported that theory. Searchers found Dyatlov and Kolmogorova's bodies the next day between the tent and the woods. Slobodin's body was then found on March 5th. All 3 looked like they were trying to return to their tent, and like the others, they were found in only their underwear. Medical examiners ruled hypothermia as the cause of death. While the fact that they were found half naked is strange, there is a logical explanation. You probably know where I'm going with this. It's called paradoxical undressing, and it's something that actually happens a lot in cases of hypothermia. Yeah, it's this really unfortunate thing where as the nerves get damaged and the brain kind of starts to shut down, it creates this sensation of like overwhelming heat. They feel like they're burning up, so they strip off all their clothes, which of course just makes them freeze even faster. So the searchers found the rest of the bodies over the next couple of months, but then, yeah, more mysteries came up. It took the searchers longer to find the other members of the group because they were in a ravine covered in snow. It was 76 meters away from the tree that I talked about earlier, and it was kind of close to what they found to be an improvised shelter. These members were dressed better than the others, but they had fatal injuries like chest fractures and skull damage. And famously, one of them was missing her tongue. One doctor described the internal injuries that he found as something kind of similar to what you see in a car crash, but they couldn't find any external wounds that would also correlate with that. And the weirdest thing of all, and this has led to tons of speculation, some of their clothes were radioactive, like more so than one would expect. The government's official statement at the time was that Dyatlov committed a series of mistakes and the group just died from overwhelming natural forces. Some of these mysteries do have logical answers. But the strange jumble of evidence has caused a lot of wild speculation about what happened to these guys. Like, why did they abandon their tent, cutting themselves out instead of just unzipping it? Why did they have internal injuries with no external ones? And what's with the radioactive clothes? So there are a few theories about what happened to them that have been floating around for quite a bit. Let's go ahead and talk about those for a second. Now, one theory is that they were actually attacked by an indigenous group that was local to the area called the Mansai, or Mansi, I don't know how it's pronounced, but the Mansai, I'll go with that. They're known to be fairly peaceful, and there were no signs of any attack anywhere around the campsite. Some suggested they were attacked by wild animals, like maybe wolves or a bear or something like that, but again, investigators found no proof anywhere around that this was the case. Some people even suggested that they took psychedelic mushrooms and that led to them being disoriented and whatnot. Again, there's no proof of that. And then, of course, there are people who think that they were attacked by a Yeti or aliens were involved in some way, because, of course, some people think that. Now, to be fair, there were some reports in the area from other hikers that were around at the time that said that they saw some orange globs in the sky, globs apparently, about the same time that the hikers were missing, but they were also apparently doing parachute mine tests, the Soviet military was in that area at the time, so that's probably most likely what that was. In fact, sometimes these sorts of mines are known to cause internal injuries but not external injuries, so maybe? To that same end, some people have suggested that maybe a weird kind of infrasound may have led to their deaths. There's apparently a wind phenomenon known as a Kármán vortex street that makes a pretty terrifying sound. So the theory is that some winds blowing through the pass could have maybe warped as they hit the sides of a mountain and created a small series of tornadoes with a deafening noise around them. Under some certain conditions, the noise can be subtle and produce infrasound, which is a vibration in the air frequency so low that human ears can't hear it. But studies have shown that infrasound can affect humans with things like, sleep loss, shortness of breath, and extreme dread. So the idea being that some weird natural condition created this horrifying noise that scared them out of their tent. But as always, the most plausible explanation is probably the most boring one, that they were caught in an avalanche. Now this has been disputed by a lot of people over time because the area that they were in was not very steep, plus their diary said that the snow was really thin at the time, so there's reason to believe that that might not have been the case. But the study that was done this year that I was referring to at the beginning of this video suggests that maybe it could have been a certain type of avalanche called a slab avalanche. Okay, so there are two main types of avalanches, loose snow and slab, and they behave very differently. So all avalanches have massive potential energy because you got a whole lot of snow, a whole lot of mass up at a high altitude, and that's what gives you potential energy. For example, if a small avalanche contains 1,000 kilograms of snow, its force is 9,810 newtons. Loose snow avalanches often start on a small area and then expand as they move. And they're caused by the snow getting deposited at a steeper angle than the snow's natural angle of repose. Slab avalanches are different, and actually way more dangerous. With slab avalanches, instead of a little bit of snow slowly accumulating and spreading out, an entire layer of snow slides away all at once. Basically, the force of gravity overcomes the bond between the snow layers and they just separate. This massive amount of snow falling all at once packs a giant wallop, and it doesn't take a lot to trigger them. Sometimes it's the wind, sometimes it's the victim themselves. But it was a slab avalanche theory that was proposed by two scientists based in Switzerland in a study published in Communication, Earth and Environment in 2021. The scientists in question are Johann Gaum and Alexander Puzrin, and what they did was they scoured the Soviet archives about the incident, and then they applied computer avalanche simulations to it. There were some basic questions that they wanted to answer, like why weren't there obvious signs of an avalanche when the search team arrived 26 days later? Whether the slope angle above the tent was steep enough for an avalanche, whether the skull and thorax injuries were typical for avalanche victims, and whether or not the hikers made a cut in the slope for the tent. So that last one has actually been a bit of a debate for a while, because that is a common thing that campers do in the snow. They cut out a little space in the snowbank and then use that snowbank as a barrier against the wind. So the theory is that the campers did that when they set up their tent, and it may have triggered a slab avalanche that then just fell on top of them. The big question is, why didn't that avalanche get triggered immediately when they made that cut? It seemed to just sit there for several hours before it fell on them. Why would it do that? So their theory suggests that there might have been a deeply seated, weak snow layer that might have been just strong enough to support the weight above it at first, but then over time, these strong katabatic winds in the area kind of slowly accumulated snow over the hours, eventually causing that weak layer to give way. So they applied their computer models to this to see if that was actually a possibility, and what they found was that with slowly accumulating snow, that avalanche could have waited between 7.5 and 13.5 hours after they made that cut. As the researchers wrote in their study, quote, "Dynamic avalanche simulations suggest that even a relatively small slab could have led to a severe but non-lethal thorax and skull injuries, as reported by the post-mortem examination." Yeah, they found that pitching a tent on a slope of even around 30 degrees can be dangerous. There have been some objections to this theory. Some of these objections include that there wasn't any snow cover on the slope, that there wasn't any wind on the night of the incident, and that the slope is just too flat, and that avalanches don't really occur in that area. Although they did find two Russian scientists that confirmed that there was snow on the slope and that the wind was present that day and that night of the incident. Now, for the objection about how flat the slope is, the researchers helped organizers who are producing a documentary called the Dyatlov Mystery. Two expeditions in the area were completed in March and September of 2021. The winter expedition had snow cover, so they weren't able to see the terrain's topography. But the summer session was clear, and this time they were able to use a drone to do a high-res 3D digital model of the terrain. What they found was that there were steps in the terrain with inclinations exceeding 28 degrees and a few places where it did exceed 30 degrees. And the slopes weren't just local, they were everywhere. Pretty much anywhere in that area where you pitched a tent, you would likely to be under a slope of that kind. So to test the theory that avalanches don't occur in that area, they organized another expedition to see for themselves. It didn't go very well though. They set out on snowmobiles, but they hit some nasty weather, and by nasty weather I mean like wind was gusting so hard it was blowing them over kind of nasty weather. But when they did finally get there, they found evidence of not just one slab avalanche, but two. In fact, since that study's publication, there have actually been several documented slab avalanches in that area. And one of the mountain guides reported that one of the slab avalanches was invisible after less than an hour of snowing. So yeah, when they arrived 3 weeks after the event and said that there were no signs of an avalanche, apparently that doesn't really mean anything. As the researchers wrote, in such severe weather conditions, the pass cannot be easily accessed by hikers, while traces of small slab avalanches disappear within a few hours. So it is very possible that it was just a basic slab avalanche that took out the Dyatlov group. Now, as for some of the other mysteries, like the fact that one of the bodies was missing a tongue, that's actually not that unusual with bodies found in nature. Yeah, when scavengers find a body, they tend to focus on the mouth and the eyes because, well, they're holes. Like, why spend energy tearing a hole through the flesh of an animal when there's a perfectly good hole right there? One with a big, loosely connected muscle just hanging out inside of it. It's just an easy meal for a scavenger, so there's nothing really weird about that. Another part of the mystery is that their clothes were slightly radioactive, which I mentioned earlier. That's led some to believe that maybe they were killed by some kind of nuclear test. But the amount of radiation on their clothes was way too little to be harmful and way too little to be from a nuclear test of any kind. My guess, and this is just my guess, is that maybe they were using some old equipment that had glow-in-the-dark paint on them. I know old school clocks used to use paint that had radium in it. I did a whole video on the radium girls, which was insane. But yeah, I imagine they probably had some equipment that had some glow-in-the-dark paint on it so that you could see it at night, you know? And then when it got impacted by a massive avalanche, that may have broken or fractured and then just kind of like scattered that paint on their clothes. The only other bit of woo-woo was that, like I said, some people reported seeing orange lights in the sky, but most people speculate that they were some kind of mines that were going off in some military tests. Which, to be fair, those might have been the thing that set off those avalanches. I think mostly the avalanche theory wasn't really considered for a long time because people didn't think there was enough of a slope, and that's just not something that you see on areas that flat. And plus, like I said, these were extremely experienced hikers and campers. They were experienced enough to know what was a dangerous slope and what was safe. But maybe in this instance, there was a bit of a, I don't know, optical illusion that made it look flatter than it actually was. They may have been a little bit off due to exhaustion from this long trip and whatnot. Combine that with a hidden layer of weak snow and some unfortunate winds and, well, there you go. Now, the researchers are quick to point out that they haven't completely solved the case. There's no way to definitively prove that this is what happened. But they did show that it's plausible. And in my experience with these types of cases, it's usually the most mundane answer that's the most likely. I know, I'm a huge buzzkill. But I actually like finding answers like that. You know, when you think there's a big fantastical mystery and then you find out it's just like, oh, the guy tripped or something. Kind of just shows how random life can be. And to me, that's the most interesting thing of all. For the record, I wouldn't say that it's that random for a group of hikers on a 2-week trek through the Russian mountains in January getting hit by an avalanche. In fact, I'd call it pretty darn inevitable in the long run. All the same, rest in peace, comrades. Now, if you'll excuse me, I gotta do something downstairs. Because tonight is the night that the wife and I make dinner together. Isn't that right, honey?
Yes, it's my favorite night of the week.
Mine too. Right now I'm cutting up some carrots to make a one-pan shawarma spiced chicken and rice, which is one of the 3 meals that I received this week from HelloFresh.
I love HelloFresh.
Every meal comes with the exact amount of ingredients that you need, so there's not a lot of measuring involved, and the recipes are super simple and easily spelled out, so even a dummy like me can do it. And the meals are created by top chefs, so you get to try new flavors that maybe you never got to try before. It's really like getting a restaurant experience for like way less money. And because they get their food directly from farmers, it's fresher than you'd find in the store. And it's just a great way for us to spend some time together.
I love you, boo-boo.
I love you too, Schnookums. In all seriousness though, we really do enjoy HelloFresh. I have cooked and eaten things that I never would have thought I'd be able to cook. And frankly, I've learned a lot about cooking by doing these things. So even when I'm not eating HelloFresh, my food tastes better. You know, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Give a man HelloFresh, and he'll make it taste really good. And you'll also get a new discount just for my viewers. HelloFresh is offering 65% off your first order and free shipping when you use the code JoeScott65 at purchase. That's like 2/3 off, guys. If you've ever wanted to try this before, this would be the time. Just go to HelloFresh.com and take a look around at all their menus, and if anything looks good to you, give it a shot. Throw that JoeScott65 down the promo code, and you'll get it for way less than you normally would. I'll put the link down in the description. Big thanks to HelloFresh for supporting this video, and a huge shout out to the Answer Files on Patreon that are helping to form an awesome community, keeping me informed, giving me great ideas, and just being generally awesome people. I gotta shout out some new people real quick. Let me mutter their names. We've got Joseph Salamone, Tom Fleet, Elias Mai, Stephen Johnson, Charlie Thompson, JR29, Mona Hayford, Travis McCoy, Justin Gordon, Ray Ellen Clegg, MW Ged, Charlene, Thomas Eves, Mark M, Darcy Mike, Neil Moore, and The Slug. Welcome to all of you, especially the Slug. If you would like to join them, get early access to videos, access to exclusive live streams, and more really cool stuff, and just be a part of an awesome community, you can just go to patreon.com/answerswithjoe. Please do like and share this video if you liked it, and if this is your first time here, maybe check out this one. How about I just link to that 4 mysterious deaths and disappearances video? If you like this one, you would probably like that one. Or any of the others over here on the side, have my face in the thumbnail, give them a look, and if you enjoy them, I invite you to subscribe. I come back with videos every Monday. All right, that's it for today. Thanks a lot for watching. You guys go out there, have an eye-opening rest of the week, stay safe, and I'll see you next Monday. Love you guys. Take care.